Welcome back to Made in Carolina. I'm your host, Lolita Rowe. Today we turn to memory, to how the flood transformed farms and towns, and how the lake that remains still carries the memory of what was lost beneath. When the dam was built, entire neighborhoods disappeared under the new shoreline. Some families were able to move their loved ones from church cemeteries. Others were never given that choice. Beneath the waters of Lake Murray rest traces of the lives that came before. J.R. Fennell, director of the Lexington County Museum, joins us again. He tells us about the Lower Dutch Fork, once one of the largest African American communities in the region. The people who lived like either right next door to each other, was it an environment of like different ethnicities that kind of lived around the same area, or was it just like one group of people?
Mm.
Because I think like generationally, the people who were there, once the people who were there that were enslaved were freed, a lot of them probably stuck around after the war and made homes for themselves, or some probably became tenant farmers. Then you had the other families that were there from when they moved into the back country.
Mhm.
Um, did those communities like interact, engage with each other?
Yeah, so you had, especially the area in the lower, kind of as they call it, the lower Dutch Fork, not too far away from where the dam was constructed, had a large percentage of African Americans, and so like you said, a lot, whether by choice or whether because they could not afford to leave or didn't know where else to go, a lot of the formerly enslaved people stuck around. And so you had communities in some cases that featured white and black living either next door to each other or not too far away, and in some cases, like you said too, sharecropping as tenant farmers. You actually did have some prosperous African Americans. There was a man I know of named Henry Corley who, he was able to purchase a large amount of land, and he actually, gave land and helped start an AME church. And was the only black member of what they called the Dutch Fork Beef Club, where they would, they had this club where they basically would ensure that they had fresh beef to share. And so, I think every family would have a day or a week where they would have to, slaughter a cow. Um,
So they had the meats,
that had
basically.
the meat. They had the meat. This is before Arby's, but they had the meat.
Before Hermes,
Yeah,
they had the meats. Okay.
that's right. And and of course, the Dutch Fork area was, it reading some of the newspaper articles and some of the things written about it, in some cases you had apparently interracial relationships that occurred, and you also had, I don't know about a significant, but you had a presence of what they called the White Caps, what we would call the Klan today. And
Okay.
so, yeah, there's articles about, Klan members going around and punishing those in interracial relationships, whipping, that sort of stuff. There were African Americans who were driven off their land. And unfortunately, you had some incidents of lynchings that occurred as well.
And so now all of that is under the water, basically.
So it's in some of those are, some of those areas are under the water or right next to it, kind of in that,
Mm.
what's now called Irma.
When the flood came, those roots, literal and generational, were disrupted. The lower Dutch Fork was just one part of a much larger valley, rich with history that vanished when the waters rose. Again, not being taught any of this and like understanding how people live in groups and how things changed over the years. Like this is before, Jim Crow laws, right, are coming into effect and kind of like moving people more separately as well.
Mhm.
Were there other historic or cultural sites that had to be moved, preserved, or sacrificed?
Yeah. So, of course, you had cemeteries and graveyards that were sometimes moved. A lot of times they were left where they were. And so the Lexington Water Power Company and Barstow Company, they, I guess to their credit, made a lot of efforts to identify burial grounds and to try to find out, um, you know, who whose family was buried there. And so if they were able to identify that, to figure out whether they wanted the graves to remain where they were or did they want them to be moved, to a church or another graveyard. And so it's fascinating to read some of those records because, there will occasionally be, graves on some man who's 90 years old, and they'll interview him and he said, 90 years old, never seen a single person come to those graves, don't know who they are, that sort of thing. It's kind of tragic in some ways. But yeah, so you had those cemeteries and graveyards. I mentioned there was the Indian mound, maybe a Native American burial site that was covered up. You also had a house. It was made out of stone, and they built because there were rocks where Dreher Shoals or near where Dreher Shoals is today. They built a canal along the Saluda to get around it, so boats traveling down the Saluda didn't run into the rocks and sink. And so there was a historic canal keeper's house there, and it's under the waters of Lake Murray. And apparently you can still see it on sonar as well. Of course, the roof is gone, but the walls are there.
Thinking about the people who buried their loved ones here, it's hard to imagine what those choices felt like. Some families decided to leave their relatives where they were, letting them rest beneath what would soon become the lake. 6 schools and 3 churches are among the structures now hidden beneath the surface, according to Lake Murray Country and reporting by Catherine Barone in the Lexington Chronicle. There's no official record of how many graves remain beneath the water, but estimates point to nearly 200 burial sites, some connected to churchyards, others to family land, and many unmarked altogether. Historical surveys show that about 193 graveyards containing more than 2,300 graves were slated for relocation before the flood. First meet Ralph and Herman Wessinger in episode 2. Now we return to their story to hear, in their own words, what it was like to leave their home as the land around them was prepared to be submerged. Their reflections come from an interview recorded in the late 1970s.
When did your family finally make the decision to move?
Well, we were forced to move, and we moved in 1929 in October.
And that's when the water was already
And the water
rising.
was kicking the heels then. Of course, we had already bought the place in Whitehall.
Years later, Ralph and Herman remembered watching their family's land disappear beneath the water.
So your daddy was a farmer, and
Right.
his daddy was a farmer.
That's right.
What was in 1928, 27, 28, what were the main crops? What was the main cash crop on the farm?
The same as we always did, cotton, corn, and wheat. And we had bought this place in the meantime, and we started moving. And it took us about a year to get moved out from there.
To move all your belongings?
That's right. We even cut fat lighter out of the woods, which would have been covered underwater right now. And we moved it. We even cut mulberry trees and split them for fence posts, because we didn't know where we was going at that time. We got it over the roof and bottom, right, H.O.? Yeah. And the fat lighter. And I was just a little fella. I remember that good.
How about livestock? Did you take that with you too?
Oh yeah. But we didn't have but 2 or 3 cows and maybe a dozen pigs and hogs combined and 2 mules.
You see, then too, when my dad and granddaddy sold out, they accepted all the buildings, but they wouldn't let them have the dwelling house. My granddaddy's dwelling house and daddy's house. And I think the reason for that, because the Wessinger Island is 20 acres. But then they rented the property out or something. Mr. Barnett in Columbia, he had a bunch of cows and all over there, and I think maybe, I don't know, that he's the man that told the two dwelling houses down in his own house. But the other buildings were moved.
For their family, it wasn't just about losing property. It was losing a place that carried their history.
Well, now that's curious because about 1928 there was a court action brought about the rights, well, it was challenging the condemnation right to condemn land above, I believe it was 261 feet. So anybody who had land above that elevation was not under the condemnation. Now, the Hardy Wessinger's family got some land back that way, and several other families did. Is that? But the Wessinger Island didn't revert to you all, so it wasn't quite high enough, huh?
Well, one thing was high enough because it ain't never been covered. No. It was 20 acres that they told us at that time that was, but would never be covered.
That still belongs to the family?
But you see what? No, they made us, forced us to sell. But and the reason that we couldn't, they wouldn't convert to us because it's about a mile across there that they would have had to build a canal or a bridge for transportation over there. That's the reason they'd offer it back to us. Am I right?
Well, that's what I was fixing to say. There was no outlet.
That's right.
No outlet.
But there are some islands that are still owned by some individuals because the court ruled that they couldn't condemn some of that land above a certain elevation.
Well, the thing about it, just going back to what we were talking about a while ago. Now, nobody knew if they could have got a lawyer
that they could trust.
Yeah, at the time, they never would have got that 20 acres to start with. See, that's where a fast deal was pulled right there by not knowing and having nobody to represent you. They couldn't have condemned that property. You see, because it wouldn't be more. And see that, and then they would use it. And my granddaddy and my daddy could have got to see about half of it going to my daddy. The other half to my granddaddy. And they could have got, if they knew and they had somebody to represent them, they could have got a tremendous price, or else they'd have had to fix them way in and out there.
Well, the picture I get, and I'm not sure this is all correct, is that the Lexington Chamber of Commerce, the local officials, thought this was a great idea. It was supposed to bring prosperity and progress to everybody. Everybody thought it was a great idea except the people whose land was being taken and who were being displaced by the whole thing.
That's right, that's right. You hit the nail on the head.
And you really didn't have anybody to champion your cause.
Challenge it. And stop it if it could be stopped.
Like many families forced to move, they packed up what they could carry, left behind generations of memories, and began again beyond the edge of the rising water. How did the flooding change life in these counties that it touches: Lexington, Newberry, Saluda, and Richland?
So, I mean, of course, you had the large number of people, those 5,000 people that had to find somewhere to go. So you had, some that chose to remain as farmers, and so they tried to buy land elsewhere so that they continue farming.
Where did your family move to from up there?
We went to, you familiar with the county, Whitehall section?
Yeah.
And he got 50 acres there, and the 200 acres we had that we paid the amount for the 50 acres that we got out of the 200 acres, right?
So we done what?
We paid as much for the 50 acres as we got out.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, I understand that.
Why was that? Land values weren't that high during that time.
Yeah, they did. It went up. Yeah, I'm sorry.
As long as there was a market for it, if somebody had some land and they knew you wanted it, the price went up, right?
Yeah, see,
just like Ray's daddy, Ray, his daddy come over here and bought this right across from the church. Mm-hmm. And lo and behold, he didn't have, how long did he have that with him? My gosh, did he
And the
burn?
house burned down.
It was his granddaddy, wasn't his daddy?
His granddaddy, yeah.
Before he could move, they could get
Before
over
he
it.
got moved and settled, by God, somebody went in there and burnt the house down. He had to rebuild. I mean, it was a fine time then.
That was
And you
the
couldn't
right.
find it. And all the local people then didn't want to move to California. They was trying to get located around. They even went and come through with buses to carry to Georgia, trying to get everybody, as many as they could to move to
Who was
Georgia.
doing that?
I don't know these developing people or these people from that had land for sale. My daddy made a trip to Georgia.
To look over the situation?
Yeah, the
The thing that surprises me is that most people who were in the valley stayed in Lexington County.
Well, that's what I was telling you a while ago. They tried to stay at home.
That's right. They went to move out to God's world to another place.
Okay.
The new dam and the promise of cheap electricity changed everything. Textile mills rose, industries expanded, and the same water that displaced families soon powered a new South Carolina economy.
You seem to have a number of people that go to work in the textile mills. That was seen as a place to find good work. And I don't know, here in Lexington or in Columbia, if this was necessarily the case, but in other areas of the state, other areas of the South, textile workers were sometimes seen as lesser than. They were seen as failed farmers. And so I don't know if any of these people that got kicked off their land faced any kind of discrimination like that or not. But that's something.
And do you know of any personal stories passed down from families impacted by the creations of the lake?
I know that there's people that we had a gentleman named Marvin Hendricks, who he's passed away now, but his family owned land. It got bought by the power company to build Lake Murray, and so they moved here to the town of Lexington. And one of the historic structures that we have here in the museum is the John Fox House, and built 1832. Marvin Hendricks' family moved into the John Fox House. They rented it from some of the descendants of the Fox family. They were known as the Maddens at the time. So he was able to kind of tell me some stories. Basically his father went to work in the textile mill, and his mother, to help make ends meet, started sewing, became a seamstress for people. So again, they went from maybe owning land and a house to renting, and from farming to working in a textile mill with some odd jobs, here and there.
Not every story about Lake Murray is heavy. Some are just downright funny.
There's also, there are some kind of more humorous stories that I've heard. There was apparently one man who, would tell people, especially from out of town, not to go to the lake, and to be careful if you go to the lake. And he would say, because of the whales. And they interpreted it as whale, WHALE, but it was just his southern accent. He was trying to say well. He said there were still whales underneath. And they would say whale. There's whales in Lake Murray.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, that sounds about right. Yes, whales. Rumors were once spread that the whales had been spotted in the lake. In truth, it was probably just large catfish and, our southern accents. Or maybe our need to explain something vast and unfamiliar. Stories like that show how people turn confusion into humor, how laughter helped them stay afloat. And so that brings me to my next question of how did the dam and the lake shape the development of the Midlands region afterwards? You mentioned about the mill workers, more textile mills, I guess, developing, but were there other things that it brought to there besides people as well, swelling the population up?
Yeah, I think it's kind of interesting that it seems that a lot of people, a lot of locals thought that Lake Murray would be nothing but a swamp, and that the mosquitoes, yeah, that was a concern, and so some people thought that mosquitoes basically were going to kill everybody. They were going to be in the lake and swarm, and malaria might kill everybody. So a lot of people were concerned, and people didn't necessarily see it as maybe an economic opportunity or anything, but you did have there's ads I found in the state newspaper where they're already, before the dam was even built, selling lakefront property. And so
Legit
yeah,
lakefront
yeah,
or
I don't know. I kind of wonder if they knew where the shoreline was actually going to be, but
bugs. If you're from South Carolina or if you've been through, our bugs are big. But they underestimated how quickly life would adapt. As the water settled, so did the people. Families adjusted, businesses reopened, and slowly, the place that once symbolized loss became a symbol of endurance. Survival soon took on a different meaning. Just a few years later, the same lake that displaced thousands became a training ground for war. If you could highlight like one overlooked aspect of the lake's history that people should know, what would that be?
well, one thing that I think, besides just kind of general stuff that we've talked about, but and some people do know this because of the name, but during World War II, they started an Army air base at Columbia, and in what's now Lexington County, and where the airport is today. And this Army Air Base they used to train, B-25 bombers. And so they one of the reasons they did this is because of Lake Murray, and of course it's got islands, and these islands provided kind of great targets for their practice bombing runs. And So there were, I mean, oh my gosh, just thousands and thousands of bombs that were dropped on some of these islands. So much so that they renamed what had been called Lunch Island. They renamed it Bomb Island. And
Oh,
yeah,
great.
and that's kind of people go today to see the Purple Martins in Lake Murray, and that's where they mostly are, Bomb Island. And so you had some accidents, unfortunately, and so in total, you had oh gosh, let me look it up here. I should know how many total bombers were lost, but 23 planes crashed in Lake Murray. And so one has been recovered, but the rest are still at the bottom of Lake Murray. And that's something. Yeah.
23.
23 planes. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Wow. So in my research so far, I'd found like they had recovered like one of these planes, but I thought that was just the one plane. I haven't realized that it was like that many.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. One of those planes, a B-25 Mitchell bomber, was recovered in 2005. Its rusted frame still largely intact after more than 60 years underwater. Today, the restored aircraft is on display at the Southern Museum of Flight in Birmingham, Alabama, a reminder of the men who trained here and the missions that they never returned from. A historic marker at the former Columbia Army Air Base lists the names of the 230 aviators who lost their lives during the training between 1941 and 1945.
Sometimes the crew survived, sometimes not. And the other story that was not, I'm sure not funny for the people involved, but it's funny to me today, is that in 1944, a plane took off, a B-25 took off from the air base, went out over Lake Murray, and for some reason, this was a nighttime practice bombing run. And for some reason, the lights on Bomb Island were not working. And so the pilot, was kind of scanning the horizon to see if he could see the target. And I guess he talked to his navigator and said, I don't see the target. The navigator said, well, we should be over it any minute now. So the pilot continued looking and saw a group of lights that looked like the target. So he flew over and they released the bombs. And it turns out it was not Bomb Island at all, but it was the Saluda traffic circle, which is out on Highway 378. So they bombed the traffic circle. And as you can imagine,
who likes a traffic circle anyway? Okay. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
And no one was there. It's just like,
it was
wow.
The neighbors that lived around there thought they were under attack. They thought the Japanese were attacking. So some of them hid in ditches. Some, got in their cars and drove away, but it scared the crap out of everybody. So
The dam was built for power. The lake was used for war. But for the families who lost everything, Lake Murray remains a story of absence, of homes, fields, and cemeteries that can't be visited except in memory. So, knowing what Lake Murray represents now and what it represented in the past, do you think the story of the displaced communities are remembered, or are they at risk of being forgotten?
I think, I would have to say that I think they're at risk of being forgotten, to be honest. I think most people, just don't think about the history. And, especially when they're out having fun on the lake, they don't think about what was there before. And, there's a large number of people that, some are local, some aren't, that don't know that Lake Murray was not a natural lake. There's people that think that, even though there is a dam, but, so, yeah.
I'm one of those people who was raised in Swansea, South Carolina. Shout out, go Tigers. But I just, like, my granddaddy would always say, "Oh, don't go to Lake Murray." So I have never actually, like, gone to the lake for fear, because I didn't know, like, oh, it was not natural, but just like the fear of something like would grab you because it's something in there. Not
Yeah.
so much something supernatural, which I'm sure you can tell me stories about, but just like there's like debris or other things that would come up and grab people.
The
Just
whales.
like that idea. Yeah, the whale. The whale would come and grab you. I'm like, now I have to go and ask my grandmother, like, "Hey, grandma," I'm just out of curiosity, because also as a country girl, I didn't go in the woods because there were a lot of whales there. So I've been a city girl or an indoor girl most of my life. It feels like just running from whales. Now I have to worry about the ones in Lake Murray too. Let's add that to the list. Do you think enough has been done to preserve or tell the stories of the people who once lived here?
Probably not. I mean, you've got, we try to do our best here at the Lexington County Museum to preserve and, try to tell those stories. You've got, I don't know how, how good they are, but there are, kind of tour boat operators who take people out and, tell the stories of the people that were there and the history. You've got, Lake Murray Country is a tourist promoting agency, and they've got a museum, and they kind of help tell these stories too. But I think you've got opportunities for, interpretive panels, I think, near, where they have some public access. I think that would be great to better tell the stories about Lake Murray. And so I think there's more we can do, maybe creating a website where people can access oral histories and people's memories. But in some cases we're trying, but yeah, I think more could definitely be done.
History doesn't vanish. It lives on in descendants, in oral traditions, in archives, and in the land itself. And sometimes, even beneath the water, stories find their way back to the surface. The question isn't just what was lost, but what we chose to remember and how we honor those memories today. This concludes our journey through Lake Murray, a story of land, loss, and legacy. But Lake Murray isn't the only lake in South Carolina that was shaped by human hands and flooded histories. 2 of them, named for Revolutionary War heroes, wade downstream with stories of their own. You've been listening to Made in Carolina, created, produced, and hosted by me, Lolita Rowe. If you love history, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. To explore more stories, visit us at madeincarolinapodcast.com. That's MadeinCarolinapodcast.com. Special thanks to J.R. Fennell and the Lexington County Museum for their time, stories, and research. Original music by Sister Sai. Additional sound effects from freesound.org. You can check out our show notes to know exactly what I used. Website by Tiffany Macer Bass. And most importantly, my mama, Brenda Rowe, who has listened as her baby girl tweaks these scripts. Love you, mama.